If you've ever seen someone so entitled they thought they could take down a family business with a phone call, just wait until you hear what this HOA Karen donned, how badly it blew up in her face. She didn't know that the person she was targeting had more support than she ever imagined, especially from someone she'd never suspect. My brother, a respected police officer in our county. The day it started was the day I opened my small restaurant, my dream project after years of saving, planning, and working through permits and inspections. The location was just outside a quiet residential neighborhood governed by a powerful HOA. And at first, I didn't think that would be a problem. We were legally zoned, had every license imaginable, and we weren't even within HOA boundaries. But that didn't stop Karen from storming over on opening day in full-on war mode. Clipboard in hand, barking about how my restaurant was going to destroy her community. She didn't even bother asking questions. She just took pictures, measured the sidewalk with a measuring tape, and left without saying anything else. I didn't even know who she was yet. I thought maybe she was some random neighbor having a bad day. Turns out she was the HOA president, self-appointed protector of the street, and she had already decided that my restaurant was the enemy. She returned the next day, stood outside with her phone in the air filming the lunch rush, and began loudly criticizing our illegal signage and unsafe traffic flow to anyone walking by. Customers were uncomfortable. One family actually left because of her behavior. I tried speaking to her calmly, explained that we had permits and zoning confirmation from the city. But she just smiled and said, "You won't last long here. I've shut places down before." That night, I got a visit from 2 uniformed police officers responding to a noise complaint and safety concern. I showed them our business license, sound level readings, and health inspection papers. They apologized and left. Oh, but Karen wasn't done. She called again the next day, this time claiming a fire code violation because she said she saw too many people inside. Again, the police came, checked, and left. I knew I had to take it seriously, so I started documenting everything, every false complaint, every incident, every witness. And then I called my older brother Marcus, who had been on the force for 15 years. I didn't want to use him unfairly. I never had, but I needed advice. When I told him what was happening, he immediately recognized Karen's name. Oh, her. She's notorious for this kind of thing. You're not her first target. She's wasted more police time than anyone else in that district. He looked into her record, nothing criminal, but a long, well-documented history of nuisance calls, complaints that never held up, and multiple warnings from different departments. Marcus told me not to worry, but also not to back down. Keep doing everything by the book. Let her trip over her own arrogance. And that's exactly what I did. Meanwhile, Karen kept escalating. She gathered a few of her loyal HOA members and staged a mini protest outside our business on a Saturday afternoon with handmade signs that said "Save our neighborhood" and "No to commercial invasion." It didn't deter customers in fact, we got more business because people wanted to support us. But she kept calling 911, kept filing bogus reports, and kept spreading misinformation. She even sent a letter to the city council accusing my restaurant of operating like a nightclub and endangering children walking home from school. She went door to door, trying to get signatures for a petition that would force us to shut down. But every step she took, she made one big mistake. She underestimated the power of community. And more importantly, the law. Because Karen didn't know what was coming next, and by the time she realized the truth, it was too late. If you've ever seen someone try to weaponize the system and get wrecked by it instead, you don't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned for the next part of this real-life HOA nightmare, and don't forget to follow Sham Stories for more unbelievable, true drama, because things are about to get a whole lot messier. Karen's crusade against my restaurant didn't just continue, it mutated into something darker and more coordinated. After her failed protest and failed 911 calls, she doubled down on her narrative that I was destroying the neighborhood. With my establishment, even though it sat on legally zoned commercial property, just adjacent to the HOA's boundary, she began holding special HOA meetings, really just angry gatherings on her front porch with her few remaining loyal followers, where she presented what she called evidence of unlawful operations, which included blurry photos of delivery trucks hour open sign at night, and cars parked legally on the street. She was relentless. It wasn't enough that she disrupted business hours. She started showing up on weekdays, pretending to be a customer, just so she could snap pictures of our kitchen through the order window or try to bait the staff into confrontations. My chef Tony had to stop her one afternoon when she barged into the back alley, claiming she was inspecting our dumpster. She wasn't just harassing you, she was looking for anything she could weaponize. Meanwhile, we kept operating above board. Every time she called the police, they came, they checked, they apologized, and they left. But even with the police growing tired of her antics, she kept pushing, and that's when she made the fatal error that changed everything. She filed a formal complaint to the city under someone else's name. A woman named Linda, a longtime neighbor and well-respected retired teacher, showed up at my restaurant in tears one day. "I need to talk to you," she said. "I just got a call from the zoning office asking about a complaint I allegedly filed about you, but I didn't file anything. When I asked to see it, they said the email was signed with my name and address, but it wasn't even close to my writing style. I think Karen forged it." That was the tipping point. I called Marcus immediately and gave him the whole story. He looped in a detective he worked with, someone who had already encountered Karen's name in more than one nuisance case. Linda's cooperation, we filed a report for identity misrepresentation and fraud, and Marcus helped initiate a quiet investigation into Karen's history of reports. What they found shocked even me. Karen had a pattern, a detailed one, of targeting local businesses she perceived as disruptive. She'd done it to a landscaping company 5 years earlier, a tutoring center before that, and even a church youth group that used loud music during afternoon rehearsals. She used the same tactics every time. Record, complain, fabricate, escalate, and she always got away with it because people were either too busy or too afraid to push back. But this time was different. We weren't going to roll over. And she didn't know my brother had been documenting every single 911 dispatch related to her calls over the past month, all of which went nowhere. The city council finally got involved when Marcus helped arrange a meeting between me, Linda, and a city liaison. We presented all the records, Karen's video rants, the fake emails, repeated false calls to emergency services, and showed the financial impact she'd caused. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It was affecting revenue, causing safety risks, and hurting people's reputations. The liaison was stunned. "This kind of community interference is unacceptable," she said. "She has no authority to do what she's doing, and she's operating outside of any HOA jurisdiction," while the official channels started moving. To address Karen's actions, something else happened that even Karen couldn't have prepared for. Restaurant Stories started gaining attention online. A local food blogger came in one afternoon, loved the food, and casually mentioned the HOA drama in his write-up. Within days, that article was shared over 20,000 times. Comments poured in. People wanted to support us. They came in droves. Our weekends went from steady to packed. We sold out of our best dishes every night, and new customers came in saying things like, "We're here because we heard about that Karen nonsense. You guys are heroes." The more people came, the more Karen boiled. She stood outside the restaurant one afternoon in a folding chair, just glaring at people. But now, the narrative wasn't in her favor anymore. People knew. One man even walked up to her and said, "Ma'am, you need a hobby or a job, or both." Ow. She was humiliated. And still, she tried to file one more complaint, this time directly to the fire marshal, claiming we had improper exits and overcrowding. The fire marshal, now aware of her tactics, showed up, took one look, smiled, and said, "This place is the cleanest operation I've seen this month." Then he turned to me and added, "If she files another false report, she'll be dealing with the DA's office next." That night I told my staff to celebrate. We held a team dinner after close, laughed about Karen's folding chair protest, and toasted to community resilience. But even with everything turning in our favor, I couldn't help but wonder, what would Karen do now that every legal weapon she had been taken away? What happens when someone who thrives on control has nothing left to control?
I was about
to find out, because what Karen did next would take her from nuisance to full-blown criminal land this time. The law wouldn't look the other way. Karen's obsession didn't die when the authorities started ignoring her. It mutated into something more desperate, more personal. The community had turned against her. The police wouldn't take her calls seriously anymore. Her forged complaint had triggered a city investigation. The fire marshal had warned her face-to-face that any more false reports would lead to charges. But instead of backing off, Karen turned inward, plotting from behind her curtains. We didn't see her for days. Her house was dark except for the occasional flicker of her porch light or a silhouette behind the blinds. We figured maybe she was finally retreating. We were wrong. Tony, my chef, showed up early to prep our breakfast menu. He unlocked the back gate and immediately saw something, a dare. Trash bins had been pulled out. Their contents scattered across the alley. It wasn't too strange. We thought maybe raccoons or someone being careless. But then he saw the slashed tires on our delivery van, which we parked beside the building each night. For clean slices, surgical. That wasn't nature. That was malice. I reviewed our exterior cameras and found a grainy figure in a hoodie entering from the alley. At 3:27 a.m., circling the van and disappearing minutes later, it was hard to tell who it was, but the body language, the posture, and the timing made it obvious it was Karen. The next day, I brought the footage straight to Marcus. He pulled some favors, got the footage enhanced through a department tool, and confirmed it was her. Her walk, her stance, the floral slippers she was wearing underneath the hoodie, exactly the ones she always wore during her weird sidewalk patrols. Marcus filed a report, and this time the district attorney got involved. Slashing tires and trespassing on commercial property with intent to vandalize carried real consequences. But while the case was processing, Karen made her boldest move. Yet, one afternoon, during a packed lunch rush, a white van pulled up directly across the street. Out came 3 individuals in matching shirts with a fake city seal that read Commercial Compliance Task Force. They entered the restaurant with clipboards and started aggressively asking staff for documents. Doors another started taking photos of the refrigeration unit. I approached them immediately and asked for ID. None of them had any government-issued badges. They claimed they were from a new municipal task force and said they had the right to inspect the premises due to a recent complaint, but their paperwork was generic printouts with no signatures. I called Marcus right in front of them when I said, "Hey bro, I've got 3 fake inspectors here. Can you send someone over?" Their demeanor changed instantly. 2 of them panicked and walked out. The third tried to stall, but the moment 2 real uniformed officers pulled into the lot, he bolted too. One officer caught his plate. Marcus later confirmed none of them were city workers. The vehicle had been rented under a dummy business name. Traced back to a local LLC owned by Karen's cousin, that was it. Karen had officially crossed the line from nuisance to orchestrator of an impersonation scam. With this new information, the DA's office issued a warrant for her arrest on multiple charges of criminal mischief, harassment, trespassing, and conspiracy to impersonate public officials. When the police showed up at her door, she refused to. "Come out," she screamed through the door, that we were all in on it, that the HOA was being destroyed, that she was the victim. After an hour, they brought in a negotiator, and eventually she stepped outside in tears, hands shaking, muttering about corruption and lawlessness. The arrest was quiet, respectful, but thorough. She was escorted away while a few neighbors filmed quietly from behind hedges. Not to mock her, but to document the moment justice finally arrived. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Nay made the local news. Her HOA role was stripped officially, and an emergency vote was held to replace her permanently. Linda, the woman Karen impersonated, was elected president unanimously. The charges against Karen stuck. She was fined, ordered to pay damages to my restaurant, and sentenced to community service and mandatory psychological evaluation. She avoided jail time, but her reputation was wrecked. Even outside her neighborhood, people saw her as the poster child of entitled abuse of power. But as much as I wanted to close the book on the Karen chapter, the aftermath wasn't all smooth. My restaurant staff had gone through months of stress. We'd been on edge for so long, some of us didn't know how to relax. One of my servers left, saying the constant drama was too much. We had to replace tires, repair cameras, and add new security lighting money we didn't plan to spend. Even customers started asking if we were safe now. Is she gone for good? They'd ask at the register. We reassured them that things were better, and they warped that the shadow Karen left behind didn't vanish overnight. Still, something beautiful began to emerge from the chaos. Our neighborhood came alive. People who used to avoid conflict started showing up to city meetings. More homeowners began reviewing their HOA bylaws, realizing they had blindly signed off on rules they never read. A group of residents created a community oversight committee to ensure that no one person ever had unchecked power again. And our business? It flourished. News coverage helped. Social media buzz helped more. But what helped most was the overwhelming support from regular people who saw the truth and chose to support us not just because they liked our food, but because they believed in fairness. One customer handed me an envelope one day. Inside was a note that read, "Thank you for not backing down. Yes, we needed someone like you here." It had a $500 check attached. I cried in the back room that day, not out of relief, but out of gratitude. Because I realized that what started as a petty attack became the fire that forged something stronger: resilience, unity, and a business that meant more than just food. But even as peace returned, there was still one thing left to do confront, the one part of Karen's HOA legacy that hadn't yet been dismantled. The secret property restrictions buried in fine print that gave the board power to shut down nearby vendors with a simple vote. Those rules had to go, and I was going to be the one to take them down. While Karen's arrest brought relief and a sense of vindication, what lingered like a bad smell were the HOA bylaws and outdated rules she had spent years manipulating to maintain control. Most residents had never read them in full, but I had. After everything that happened, I felt obligated not just to protect my restaurant, but to ensure no one else would face what I did. Buried in the legalese of the original HOA charter was a clause called Peripheral Business Mitigation Rights. It's a piece of language that allowed the HOA board to petition the city for forced regulation of any business operating within 150 feet of the HOA's outer perimeter if deemed inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood, was vague, open to interpretation, and dangerous in the wrong hands. Karen had never succeeded in pushing it through officially against us, but if someone like her were ever to rise again, that clause could give them the ammunition they needed to start the war all over again. So I brought it up to Linda at the next community open forum. She was now fully acting as HOA president, and the board under her leadership had already begun dismantling Karen's old enforcement committees. "This clause," I said, holding up a highlighted printout, "is a relic from when this neighborhood was built 25 years ago. It has no place in a modern community that borders commercial property, and it almost cost me everything." Linda listened carefully, and to her credit, didn't brush it off. "Let's bring it to a vote," she said, and so we did. Flyers were printed. Community debates were held. Some residents were hesitant, not because they supported Karen, but because they feared change. "What if a nightclub moves in next?" one man asked. "What if it opens the door to chaos?" But others, dozens more, stood up and told their stories. Stories of Karen using that clause to harass a landscaping team that mowed the city strip, or the high school fundraiser that got shut down mid-event because she said their tent violated the HOA's visual integrity. The truth spread quickly. I organized a public Q&A night at the restaurant, offered free coffee and cookies, and invited residents to come and ask any questions they wanted about the process, the impact, and the safeguards still in place to protect peace and quiet. That night, our dining room was packed, not with customers, but with neighbors. Some I had never spoken to before came up to thank me. "We were scared to speak out," one woman admitted. "Karen made everyone feel like they'd be punished for having an opinion." I knew then that this wasn't just about my business. It was about healing a silenced community. The final vote came 3 weeks later, and it wasn't even close. The clause was repealed with 87% in favor. That moment marked the true end of Karen's rule. Not her arrest, not the protests, not the courtroom it. was the people reclaiming control from a document that had quietly enabled her for years. But just as we celebrated the repeal, another complication emerged. Karen had filed a civil complaint from her attorney's office, claiming that her unlawful arrest and neighborhood defamation had caused emotional distress, and that she had been wrongly portrayed as a criminal in the media. It was a last-ditch attempt to regain sympathy and shift the narrative in her favor. Most people laughed it off, but I didn't, because even though she had no ground to stand on, the complaint still had to be answered, and that meant court time, legal fees, and more stress. Luckily, Marcus had predicted this. He'd already spoken with a lawyer who agreed to represent me pro bono, citing the overwhelming evidence and the public good our case represented. She's playing the victim card because it's all she has left, the lawyer said. But courts deal in facts, and the facts are not on her side. Sure enough, when the hearing date came, Karen appeared with a frazzled public attorney and visibly aged 10 years. She didn't yell, she didn't point, she barely made eye contact when her side tried to paint me as a troublesome business owner who antagonized her with public campaigns. The judge cut them off, citing multiple instances where her complaints were not just unfounded, but malicious. When they presented the petition she forged under Linda's name, the courtroom gasped. Even the defense attorney looked embarrassed. The case was dismissed in under an hour, and Karen was ordered to pay court costs. She left without speaking to anyone. It felt final. But for me, the closure didn't come from the court ruling. It came from the days that followed, when I could unlock the restaurant in the morning without anxiety, knowing that I wouldn't be greeted by police cars or protest signs or poisoned glares from across the street. The restaurant grew stronger. Our team became a family, and the story of what happened, how a single woman's vendetta failed against a wall of truth and unit, became part of our identity. I even printed a small framed sign and hung it behind the register, built with hard work, protected by community.
Ow.
One day Marcus came in, looked at the sign, and nodded.
That's exactly
What this place is, he said. Customers still asked about the story, and we always told it with humility. Not to shame Karen, but to show how easily systems can be abused when no one stands up. And perhaps the best ending came quietly when I received a letter in the mail from a nearby HOA president of a different neighborhood. It read, "We heard what happened. Thank you for reminding all of us what happens when we let fear and control override reason. Reviewing our bylaws this month. You inspired us." That's when I realized this story had traveled far. Beyond our street, it had become a mirror, reflecting what goes wrong when power is unchecked and what goes right when people come together. And though Karen's shadow had loomed large, it was now behind us. But before this journey truly ends, there's one last chapter to tell, because the final twist, the one that no one saw coming, happened when Karen tried to disappear quietly and found herself face to face with the one person she couldn't intimidate, influence, or manipulate. Just when we all believed the saga was over and Karen had finally vanished from our lives, something unexpected happened that brought the story full circle in a way none of us could have scripted. It began with a routine lunch rush on a cloudy Thursday afternoon. I was behind the counter helping a new server manage incoming orders when I noticed a man in a plain gray suit walking in with a very serious expression. He wasn't dressed like a regular customer, nor did he move like one. He scanned the room quickly, spotted me, and walked directly over. "You're the owner, correct?" he asked. I nodded, wondering if this was another permit official or someone from the zoning office. "I'm Detective Russell with the Internal Affairs Division," he continued, flipping open a badge with a gold seal. "I need to speak to you about Karen Worthington." My stomach dropped, not out of fear, but sheer disbelief. "She's trying again?" I asked, already exhausted just hearing her name. But Russell shook his head. "No, she's under investigation. For something else? We just discovered some of her previous reports and records were tied to a larger pattern involving harassment of multiple businesses throughout the region. Your case helped spark the inquiry." He explained that after our story went public, several other small business owners in surrounding neighborhoods came forward with their own experiences, similar patterns of repeated false reports, harassment, and manipulation using HOA status or fabricated community concerns. Karen hadn't just done it to us. She'd done it to at least 5 others over a span of 8 years. Some had shut down, but none had fought back the way we did. Now that they had a pattern, law enforcement had the justification to open a formal case for criminal harassment with multiple victims. That alone was stunning enough, but what happened next truly shocked me. We tracked her to a property she recently inherited from a deceased relative. Cabin-style house 2 towns over, Russell continued. She's been living there, keeping a low profile. But one of our officers visited last week to serve a follow-up subpoena, and she refused to open the door. Guess who the responding officer was? I smiled before he even said it. Marcus, your brother, he confirmed. Apparently she opened the door, saw him, and froze. Then she slammed it shut and started screaming about corrupt brothers in blue. I couldn't help but laugh. But what came next sobered the moment. She's claiming she's being persecuted for being a whistleblower. She filed a formal complaint against Marcus. We know it's baseless, but we have to treat every complaint seriously, even from people like her. I felt a wave of anger, but nodded. He'll be fine. She's just swinging blindly now. Detective Russell agreed. Probably. But if it escalates, she may end up institutionalized instead of just fined or convicted. We're watching her closely. That night, I called Marcus. He was calm, even amused. She's got nothing, he said. She thought she could smear me like she did with you. But unlike your business, I've got body cams and legal backup on every step. Still, he admitted it was unsettling. She really believes she's the victim in all of this? And that was perhaps the saddest truth of it all, Corinne. Stripped of her HOA power, rejected by the neighborhood, still living under the illusion that she was the one being wronged. She never learned. But we did. The neighborhood had transformed. Our restaurant had become a hub of connection, laughter, and resilience. And our story didn't just inspire nearby communities to stand up to tyranny, created a ripple effect. A national blog picked up the story. Then a small media channel interviewed me and Marcus about the bizarre way HOA control can spin out. Of hand, people flooded the comments with their own Karen stories, HOA nightmares, and calls for reform. We weren't just a restaurant anymore. We were a symbol. One afternoon, weeks after the dust had truly settled, a young man in his 20s came in and quietly ordered lunch. When I delivered his plate, he looked up and said, "Thanks for fighting back." My dad owned a hardware store that got shut down by someone like her. I never got to say goodbye to it. I sat with him for a few minutes, and we shared a quiet moment of understanding. That's when I realized that even though Karen thought she had power, what she really had was a fragile illusion propped up by fear, silence, and bureaucracy. The real power had always belonged to the people willing to speak out, and once they did, her empire crumbled. On the 1-year anniversary of our grand opening, we held a community dinner free for anyone who lived within 5 blocks. We closed the street with city permission, set up lights and tents, and served plates of food while a local band played soft jazz under the stars. Clint, the grumpy neighbor who once sided with Karen, toasted us with sweet tea and said, "I was wrong about you." This place brought us together. Linda, now re-elected as HOA president with full support, gave a short speech, thanking us for reminding everyone what true leadership looks like, measured, fair, and based on truth, not fear. Tony grilled ribs out front. My staff wore survived, Corinne, 2023 aprons. And Marcus stood beside me, arms folded, watching the laughter ripple across our street. "Think she can hear us from the cabin?" he joked. I chuckled. Let her. We earned this peace. That's when I knew this wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the beginning of something stronger. If you've ever faced someone who thought a clipboard and a title gave them power over your dreams, know this: they only win when you stay silent. Speak up. Push back. Never underestimate what happens when a community stands together. Thank you for following this story. For more real neighborhood drama, justice, and unforgettable showdowns, don't forget to subscribe to Sham Stories, where every Karen meets her match, and the truth always wins in the end.